Hey everyone, today we're going to be doing a review of the GPD Win 4. I've been looking forward to checking this device out. I had a PSP and a PS Vita when I was growing up, so seeing this device brings back strong nostalgic vibes. So a special thank you to geekbuying.com, who is kind enough to send me a review unit, as well as providing a discount code for anyone that's looking to pick one up today. The discount code brings the price down to $7.99 USD for the 1TB version, but we'll go more into that after the review. The scope of today's review is going to be a review of the specs. I'll give you my first impressions of the device, and then we'll test the screen, the sound, and some gameplay. And of course, I'm not going to just stop with the review. I've got some guides and tutorials I'm working on, and I have the day one guide mostly recorded. So whether you already own a Win 4 or are planning to purchase one today, I'll have some more videos ready to go soon. But we've got a lot to cover today, so let's dive into it. For specs, we have the AMD Ryzen 7 6800U APU. We have 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5 RAM. For storage, we have a 1TB M.2 2280 size SSD with a slot that supports PCIe Gen 4. For the screen, we have a 6-inch 1080p display with 45 and 60Hz refresh rate support. For the size of the device, it's 92mm tall, 220mm wide, and 29mm thick, and weighs 604 grams. For I/O, we have one USB-A port and two USB-C ports. One of them is USB 4 and the other one is USB 3.2 Gen 2. We have a 3.5mm headphone jack, an optical finger pad for mouse control, a UHS 1A2 micro SD slot. For connectivity, we have Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2. We also have an optional 4G LTE add-on that you can get. For the OS, it will ship with Windows 11 Home Edition, and there's also a fingerprint reader for quick login. Now that we've got the specs summarized, let's take a quick visual overview of the device. Let's start things off by taking a look at the top. So on the top, we have our headphone jack, we have our USB-A and a USB-C. That's the USB 4 one. Moving over to the bottom, we have another USB-C. This is USB 3.2 Gen 2. And then on the right side, we have a little reset button. And moving to the left side, we have a toggle for gamepad and mouse mode, as well as our micro SD card slot. Moving over to the back, we have two bumps that act as handles and two buttons. Feels like they're tactile switches. Overall, the device feels quite solid. The best way I could describe it is it's very dense. Being a smaller device, the joysticks are a little bit smaller, but they work pretty well. And the D-pad, I don't use it much, but for what I've done, it's worked well. The face buttons are on the smaller side, about the size of a PS Vita. The bumpers are clicky. The triggers have a short movement, so for some games this could be good, and others you may be wishing there was more. The joysticks also click down with L3 and R3, and I really like the finger mouse pad. The fact that you can click it in, or you can hold it for a right click is great. On the left side, we have our fingerprint reader, and then on the bottom right in the far corner, we have a menu button, which seems to be Windows plus G. For how small it is, they've definitely crammed in a lot. And the last thing for the visual overview, I'd actually forgotten the original recording. I'm not used to having a keyboard, but you can slide up the screen and you have a keyboard here, and the buttons, they feel a little bit soft to press, and it's a little bit hard to reach if you're trying to just reach across. So you're going to need to adjust your grip if you're wanting to reach a little bit further. Overall, the keyboard works well and it avoids getting fingerprints all over the screen. A couple of notes for the sake of transparency. For the screen and speaker test, I had to turn up the volume just a little bit so you could hear it properly. I also had the mic that was plugged in accidentally rotated a little bit, so the left channel was louder than the right channel, so I just made an adjustment to the stereo so that it was balanced. And I've done the best I can to accurately capture the screen's colors, so hopefully it gives you a good idea. Okay, let's jump to the screen and speaker test. So my personal thoughts on the speakers and screen. The speakers are a little bit louder than some other devices, but they're not as loud as the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck has a bit more of a bassy sound, but these speakers do sound better than some other devices I've tested. As far as the screen, it's more vibrant than the Steam Deck, but a little bit less vibrant than, let's say, the iNeo 2. I would say the colors are comparable to my AOK Zoe or One X Player 2, and I personally like those screens, so this one gets a pass for me. Although a little bit less vibrant than the iNeo 2 screen, I do find that because it's separate, the screen doesn't get warm, where I find that to be a challenge on my iNeo 2. I'll show you a couple 30-watt TDP tests with God of War, but most of my tests are going to be at lower TDPs to demonstrate better battery life options. I'm also going to keep it simple today. I'm just going to show you a little bit of God of War as well as Persona 5. For the sake of clarity, I'm going to show you the game footage from my capture card, but I'll also have the Win 4 in the bottom right corner while I'm playing it so you can see both perspectives. And one last thing, I have the device output resolution set to 1080p, so any FSR settings are going to be working with 1080p. First up, let's check out God of War. So I have the TDP set to 30, I have FSR turned off, and I have the graphics set to low. As you'll see, the FPS is somewhere in the mid 30s, sometimes goes up to 40, so this would be a good candidate for 30 FPS lock. But for those that like to try crazy things, I'm going to go ahead and turn the graphics to original and we'll see how that does. I'm not going to push it higher than that. I'll leave that madness up to you guys if you want. So as you can see, it's pretty close to 30. So you could try to lock to 30 FPS, but you're going to get dips probably in high action sequences. So I wouldn't recommend it. Next up, still at 30 watts, we're going to do the opposite end of the spectrum. We're going to target 60 FPS. I'm going to set the graphics to low and FSR to ultra performance. So at these settings, we don't get a locked 60 FPS, but we get it pretty close. It dips down to mid 50s, high 50s. So we're not quite there, but we're pretty close. If you're okay with the occasional dips where you're going to get inconsistent frame time, then this setting could work well for you. Okay, let's move on to 15 watts so we don't murder our battery. I'll show you a couple different options. First of all, we're going to set our graphics to low and FSR to ultra performance. And as I had in the other clips, I'm going to let the system determine the GPU frequency. As you can see, the frame rate is in the high 30s, sometimes low 40s, so you can't really aim for 45 Hertz because we aren't getting 45 FPS. So I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to lock the GPU at 1100 megahertz, and I'm going to keep the settings exactly the same as they were just before. This is something that can help with some games in certain scenarios. I was hoping we'd be able to hit at least 45 FPS consistently, but we're just under that, so we're at about 44, 43, sometimes above 45, but we're certainly doing better than we were. So sometimes locking the GPU frequency can be beneficial. It's all about finding that particular spot. So I really only wanted to show this, that if you're going to buy a Windows handheld PC, in particular today we're talking about the Win 4, so just know that whatever performance you're getting out of the box, you may actually be able to improve it. So if you're seeing something like I was showing before where it's in the high 30s, look at how much better we're doing right now. Now we're closer to 50, all from tweaking a few settings, which is honestly half of the fun. And one last setting for best battery life, 13 watt, FSR set to ultra performance, graphics to low, and I would recommend trying to lock for 30 FPS on this. That'll do it for God of War. Let's move on to Persona 5. I'll start this one off a little bit different, so I'll show you 10 watt and 15 watt side by side. I have the resolution to 1080p and all settings at max. As you can see, both hit 60 FPS but have trouble holding it. So if you want higher fidelity but also good battery life, I'd recommend just going with 10 watts. A game like this isn't going to be really impacted by stuttering. But I'm going to go ahead and try to go for the maximum battery performance here. So we're going to test out Persona 5 Potato Quality Mode. So I've dropped the TDP to 5 watts. I've set all settings to as low as they can go. I have 50% scaling and I have the resolution set to 720. So blown up, it looks pretty bad, but on a 6-inch screen, you're not really going to notice it. So if you want to do this, you'll get maximum battery life and you'll get, 30 FPS, maybe more. And if you're wondering, the minimum TDP is 4 watts and you can set the resolution lower, but at 4 watts, I was getting 20 FPS. So that's just a quick glimpse at the performance. There's a number of other videos you can find on YouTube if you want to learn more. I have a number of 6800U devices and it's a great chip. You'll really enjoy it. So let's go ahead and start to wrap this up. I'll give you a summary of what I like about the device and maybe some things that need improvement. I'll start off my summary with what I like about the device. The first thing would be the aesthetics. Now I think most of this is coming from nostalgia. I grew up with a PlayStation Portable and a PS Vita, so I love the look. The next thing I like is the weight. It's a little bit lighter than some of my other handhelds. Although much smaller, the weight isn't super different, but it feels really dense, which for some reason is satisfying to hold. So a little bit more on that is actually the size of the device. So it's both a pro and a con. I do like that it's small and easy to pocket, but for some games, having a larger device might be a little nicer. Another thing I like is the screen. It seems to be vibrant enough, and with 1080p at 6 inches, it's pretty sharp. And there's some of the features that I really like. I like the fingerprint scanner. center. I've just kind of gotten used to it on some devices and it's hard to live without now. I didn't think I'd like it as much as I do, but I do really like the keyboard. And that little optical finger mouse pad is actually pretty nice. I find myself using it quite a bit. And of course, there's the APU, the Ryzen 7 6800U. It was definitely a major step forward for handheld devices. So those are a few things that I like about the device, but there is room for improvement in some areas. The first one would be the ergonomics. One thing I would like would be larger grips. I find some of my other handhelds that do have that are very comfortable to hold for long periods of time. I'll be addressing this with a grip case that I'm going to be ordering, and I'll be testing it out soon. I'll let you guys know how it turns out. One other thing is the micro SD slot's a little bit recessed into the case, so I found it's a little bit difficult to get it to actually click, to get it to click in or to click out. It could also be I cut my nails pretty short, so I have a little bit of difficulty with it. So not a real big deal, but it was just one thing I had noticed. And the last thing would be that the outside of the device, the shell itself, can feel a little bit warm when you're playing at higher TDPs or for a longer period of time. So overall, my thoughts of the device is I do really like it. I find the positives do outweigh the negatives for me, but I think with buying a handheld, this really comes down to personal preference. So who I'd recommend this to is someone that's looking for decent performance in a small package. I tested out emulation on it, and it's a great machine for that. So if that's your thing, I would definitely recommend this one. And lastly, I'd recommend it to people that are used to tinkering with devices, changing settings and trying to get the most performance out of it. If you're coming over from console gaming, I would strongly recommend that you look up some tutorials for PC gaming. Anything you find for PC gaming should apply here. On the flip side, those that I'd recommend to skip this one are maybe people with very large hands, or those that have difficulty with smaller screens or text. You may be better off checking out some of the other devices that GeekBuying has. I think they have the WinMax 2, and there's plenty of other large handhelds. And lastly, relating to what I mentioned before, if you're coming from consoles and you're expecting a Nintendo Switch experience, you're simply not going to get that. Windows takes a lot more configuring and it takes getting comfortable, so make sure you do your research before you purchase. Speaking of buying, let me show you how to purchase from GeekBuying. So we'll go to their website, and currently only white is in stock. And right now you see the price is $10.99. Don't worry about that. We're going to have a discount code. Once you click to view your cart, it will prompt you to set up an account, so go ahead and do that. There's a free case as well as a cleaning kit. So we're going to proceed to checkout. You'll need to fill in your shipping information, but for now we're going to scroll down to the bottom and I'm going to show you where to input the code. I'll leave a link to the website as well as the coupon code in a pinned comment as well as the video description. So just to show you, I applied the coupon and now the price is down to $7.99 USD. So what do you think of the Win 4? For those that don't have it, is this something that interests you? And for those that already have a Win 4, how are you liking it? Let's talk about it in the comments or check out the OKestGamer Discord. And that's going to wrap it up for this one. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching.